All right, this is December the 1st, 1998. Can you believe that?
Oh, wow.
Who are you?
My name is William Warder, originally Willie Warder in the records. And, up until I came back from the war, I was Willie Warder.
Have you ever been Bill?
Frequently, most of the time. That's a cheap way to call me.
Let's see, and I am Kathy Flynn interviewing you today, along with the other people that we want to record for our New Deal recording of the people who participated in the New Deal programs in New Mexico. Were you a New Deal artist in New Mexico?
Yes, I was. I painted murals in the Raton Public Library, the Carnegie Library, in 1937.
I'm going to be very bold and say, and how old were you? Because I remember that you were just a kid, right?
I'm still just a kid, but I was a 17-year-old kid then.
Okay. Did you paint the mural with somebody else in Raton?
Yes, there were two young fellows with me. I designed them and they helped paint, and Manville Chapman sort of oversaw the creation. They were done on canvas, that was not attached, on canvas panels, maybe 5 feet square, maybe a little larger. And let's see, the fellow's name. One's name was Manther Maldonado, and the other one was Mike Zadunich.
I'm very glad to hear you. I've wondered how to pronounce that word, Zadunich.
Zadunich, yeah.
Of course, in Raton, you had a lot of people with Central European heritage. Had some very interesting names back there.
A lot of them. It was a very interesting community because there were the coal camps where the Slovakian people lived, the Italian people in another one, the Scots lived in another one, the Greeks were really interspersed, and there were several ethnic groups.
Now, what is your ethnicity?
I like to say that I'm 1/3 English, 1/3 Indian, and 1/3 Mexican.
As I recall in the past, you indicated because of that you are a true American. Is that right?
I sure am.
All right.
I'm the. Well, I guess I always feel like I was so qualified that I was disqualified.
Tell us more about that.
Well, my father was half Comanche and half English. His father was from a very important family, John Warder, who came from Missouri, whose father was, my grandfather was born in 1841, and he ran away from his family, even though he was the last child and the heir of the old Baptist minister. He was born in 1841. He came to New Mexico in the early 70s. Before that, he went to California and had a family there. So he was running the wagon. He was a wagon master for the supply trains to Fort Union. And in the course of those trips, he met my grandmother, who was Comanche. She was the child of a captive family that the Spanish people, it was a practice that the Comanches and the Spanish people or the Mexican people stole each other's families and people and used them as labor, as slaves. It was slavery. So that was my father's background. My mother was Well, my grandmother is buried in San Juan Pueblo, was born there, and I never could identify her lineage, but she looks very strongly a Pueblo Indian. And then the others were Spanish background. I did a lot of family research on these people, and really Betty got me into it because she's a great genealogist.
And who is Betty?
Betty is my wife. She's my boss.
Just wanted to make sure we got her identified.
Oh, yes.
Where were you born?
I was born right looking down at that mountain in Guadalupe, New Mexico.
A painting up on your wall here, okay?
Painting on the wall, yeah.
And where is Guadalupe?
It was the last outpost in New Mexico. Up above Mora, in Mora County, 13 miles up. And it was an unknown, unheard of place until David Cargo went up there and had a dance. And all the men know who still live, my cousin still, he danced with Mrs. Cargo. And he promised him a highway, and he built him a highway. And now Guadalupe is part of that.
Yeah, you can still find Cargo signs up there for governor.
You bet.
And that was some time back. Of course, Cargo was not even in the state at the point where you were living in Guadalupe.
Oh, no, not at all. This was, I was born in Guadalupe. We lived there until I was about 7 years old, and the family migrated as migrant farm workers up into northern Colorado, working in the beet fields. On the way back, we stopped to visit family relatives in Trinidad, Colorado. They were coal miners. And then he had a half-brother in Raton, where he stopped to visit. And I never got out of Raton until I graduated from high school.
Wow. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had a brother who died this year. He was 93. The meanest person I ever knew in my life.
Now, that's a typical brother's response, yes.
Yeah.
What did he say about you?
I never heard it. I don't think he acknowledged my existence.
Oh, okay.
He was Mama's boy.
Oh.
And he didn't like that I came along 15 years later to displace him.
Mm-hmm.
I had 5 sisters. Of course, there were 4 children. Families lost babies. You know,
Sure.
There were 2 girls and 2 boys that never made it. And I still have 2 sisters. They live in California. One of them said, "What do you hear from the rest of the family?" And she was, "Oh, wait a minute, we're the rest of the family." So they're just a little younger than I. I was born in 1920. I'm 78.
Oh, thank you very much for putting that in there. One never knows whether to ask that or not.
Well, I'm not afraid of it.
Okay. You went to school in Raton and graduated in 1940?
In 1940.
Right. At what point did you start thinking you might be interested in art?
When I was 3.
3. Okay.
It never occurred to me in my life, ever, that I was not going to be an artist. Never. And it was established in the school. The teachers immediately implemented me with art and art supplies and the projects, and it pushed me on. The determination to learn to speak English really was, I had a very positive experience. No, I decided to be an artist early.
How did your family feel about it? Did they support that?
My mother liked that very much. My mother was my great inspiration in life. And she pushed me. She said, in Spanish, I used to ask her a lot of questions. And I asked her about people and about the troubles of the world. And she said, "Hijo, cada cabeza es un mundo." Every head is a world. Every mind is a world of its own. And you have a very good one. You have the right to question anybody, any human being who thinks and talks. and use it well. And that gave me the push. And she taught me how to draw. I argued with her about the nose of a horse and other things. And she drew, she made pottery, she was a builder, a house builder. She was, the problem with the family was my father did not belong to the land grant heirs. He was an outsider. He was Comanche and English didn't qualify you for the rights to the communal usage of the land.
Hmm.
So, but my father was totally determined to belong. And he did it very well. He was a sweet, loving, happy man. But we had to leave. He knew that we had to leave. And it really, my family allowed me the choice and the freedom to decide what my life was going to be or what it was. When I started school, I came home one day in the late spring, and my mother said, I have news for you. And I thought, what? She said, you're going to work. You got a job.
Oh, yay!
What? You know, well, it was customary for children up to that time to be part of the breadwinners.
Sure.
And I got a job selling newspapers, which was one of the most fortunate things that ever happened to me, because I owned the town. I was free. I got up at 6, went down, picked up my newspaper, the Denver Post at first, and I met all the movie stars, all the people on that train that stopped the California Limited or super cheap, and tried to sell them papers.
How old were you?
All the time from first grade. I was 7.5 years old. And from there on, I sold newspapers until I was able to get a paper route. I can remember vividly standing next to Janet Gaynor.
Oh.
And she was just a little taller than I. A little rounder, with flaming red hair. And one day, when I came, this little boy came off the train with knickers and a little hat. Came down, stood there, looked at me. Hello? I said, hi. It was Jackie Cooper.
Oh.
He was the same age, the same size as I. And we stood there and stared at each other for about 10 minutes. And they yelled all aboard, and he went back up, and I went out with my papers. Oh, a lot of people. I remember measuring my feet, my shoe length on the feet of Primo Carneri, who were size 23. It was 4 lengths of my feet, and then some.
Well, so you felt like you were the king of the community, having that many opportunities that other kids might. Now, they probably had other opportunities, but you were happy with yours.
I had the best.
Okay.
You know, I walked into every store, every restaurant, and I'm a friendly guy. Naturally,
oh, really?
I was born that way. And they put these posters with clear bristle board in back, 11 by 14, advertising a church supper or something coming into town. And I went in and I drew on the back of them because it's beautiful cardboard. And every store in town had drawings. And as soon as they changed them, I went back in all the stores and all the people knew me. And there were all these pictures, you know. The Raton Museum still has one of those early drawings that I did of the cowboy riding into town with a lazy dog and the whittlers in a saloon in a false front store.
Did you ever sell any of these things?
Yes, I had a friend who sponsored me, and we were close until he died. And he had a bar, and I hung around in a bar from the time I was 12 years old till I was eligible to drink, and then I quit hanging around the bar. But I sold them to the tourists, 25 cents a piece.
Who was this friend?
His name was Rube Johnson. He was really the special person in my life. He was an old cowboy. He was a foreman of a big ranch in West Texas, had 50 cowboys under him. His horse had fallen with him and poked out his eye. He was a little man that wasn't very little. He was a big man. And in the summers I worked out on his ranch and I herded sheep and drew and studied the sky and everything else. I spent 3 months at a time up there. I only did that one summer and then other short periods. But every year I had a project in school. The first year, that's the year that I did a mural. And I was studying with Manville Chapman. The second year, I was sent to school. The community, the Kiwanis Club gathered the funds and sent me to towns to study with Emo Bistro. I spent 3 months. That was a wonderful time. The third year, in the summer, I herded sheep. And the fourth year, I worked in the NYA. And I did murals, by the way. The NYA had a very nice camp up at Battleship Rock in Jemez. And they had a large dining room. And I did panels of murals on those walls. They were done with enamels, with enamel paint rather than oil paint. But they were, I spent 3 months painting these murals. Unfortunately, they tore down the building and everything disappeared, you know. A lot of my paintings.
And that was Camp Shaver?
That became Camp Shaver.
Okay.
It was, at that time, it was the NYA, which was the National Youth Administration, which is equivalent to the CCC, which wasn't far away. And
it was the younger version of the CCC. You were just the kids.
Yeah.
Huh?
And I went out there with these ruffians. And they put me down in a hole digging. And the first shovelful I threw up, there was a big boulder. It came down and popped my finger open. And a man got real angry with me and wanted to know if I knew anything. I said, yeah. I said, I'm an artist. I don't know how to do this. His wife was a nurse. His name was Clark. And they doctored me and said, well, you know, we need somebody to draw furniture. I said, what kind? He said, we have a book with layouts for Spanish colonial furniture. And I took all these drawings of Spanish colonial furniture and enlarged them full size so that the boys could make templates and do Spanish. And that was the project that they did up there.
Was that book possibly, and it probably, I don't know if it was or not, was that one that was done by Bill Lumpkins for the NY program?
I think it was, yes.
Because I know he did some things up in northern New Mexico with that.
And that book was furnished me, and I took these and I gridded with the tracing paper, gridded it off, made it large, did all the designs, and he did a very authentic reproduction of the early Spanish colonial furniture. I didn't know about Bill Lumpkin, but I remember the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that he did that kind of thing, so I was just wondering. I want to make sure we get these things in sequence. So the piece in, are you turned on again? Okay. In order to get these things in sequence, let's just briefly go through them, and then we can certainly go back to it. Was the first piece that you did at the library when you were a young man, or was it this summer?
No,
first New Deal period, I guess.
The first piece was a library mural.
And you were like in grade school then or something?
Well, I was early high school.
Ninth grade, something like that. Okay, so, and that was, do you have any idea, did you get paid for that, or was that, how was that a New Deal project? Do you know? Was it NYA?
Oh, they paid us, but very little. I often wondered how could they, but I never was paid anything but very little.
Right. Okay, so you did that. You did, when did you do this battleship activity? I mean, because you were still a teenager.
Yes, that's right. That was I had just turned 18. I guess that was the summer of I was 18.
So 38.
Yeah.
Did you do anything, were there other things? I mean, like, when did you do the things at the El Portal Hotel, or the...
Well, the El Portal Hotel were done a while later.
Okay, we'll get those later. You did something at, well, now, the Port of Entry, that's later.
That was in 1940.
Okay. So was there anything between, say, 9th grade and 18? Did you do other NYA projects?
I didn't do, no, only private projects.
Okay. One of those private projects, as I recall, was that you shared with me earlier, was in relation to one of the bankers in Raton.
That's right.
And then you later painted something up on a rock, a mountain.
Yes,
Share
I
that
did.
story. It's wonderful.
Well, the first job that I had, Manville Chapman had done murals in his hotel down in a lounge, and beautiful, big, almost life-size horses, cowboy scene. And
What hotel?
that was in the Yucca Hotel, which is the skyscraper in Raton, you know.
It was formerly the Swastika.
It was a swastika originally.
Okay.
And of course, the embarrassment of the swastika caused the change of it, even though they're still up there. And that hotel had all of this, but Manville, unthinkingly, had a scene where the horse was holding the cap and they were branding it, and the horse was, the view of it was from the rear, and the tail was flared up pretty high, and he was very graphic about that section of the horse. And people came in and they couldn't see anything but horses. And Mr. Johnson said, this was my friend Rube, he owned the bar. I said, can you do anything with that? And I said, do you want me to pull the tail down? He said, yeah. So with all due respect to Manville Chapman, I pulled that horse's tail down.
Oh, okay.
And now those murals were destroyed when they remodeled. I have a photograph in there, a little one, of one of those murals. It was at House Pueblo.
But it was a private project.
It was a private project, yes. And so when they remodeled the hotel, Mr. Joe Delisio, who was one of my sponsors, he's the man who bought my painting so I could go to college.
He was the banker in town.
He was a banker. He was a wonderful, kind man. Bless his heart. I always had a good feeling about him. And he called me. He said, I have to tell you some very bad news, and I'm apologizing. We tore down your mural. Would you come up and do something else for our new bank? So I did. I did them Untitled, and they were very nice historical murals. They're up in the boardroom now, but they were in the bank of the background. They were done on masonite, 4x8 masonite, 3 panels. And it's the basic history of the area, the mining and cattle ranching and the skiing and all the things that happened in Raton.
And which bank is that?
It's in that bank in that Yucca building, the swastika building.
Okay.
I don't remember.
I was trying to. There were 2 banks.
It's the International State Bank.
International State. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you accomplished that, and he paid you how?
Money.
Money. All right. And you were able to get brushes and go up and oil painting and paints and things, and go up to in the mountains and paint, maybe.
Well, I always did that, brushes, getting brushes. Let me tell you about that. There was a gentleman who wanted a painting, and he really wanted a copy. It was a Kaus painting. It's a classic of this Pueblo Indian with his hand on a large piece of pottery with his headband, and probably Yakima Pueblo. And Mr. Kaus did, you're acquainted with Kaus.
Oh, yes,
Beautiful
yes.
work. I mean, he was a great illustrator. And he wanted a copy of it. So I did a copy of that painting. And he took me, he said, I'm going to give you some paint for doing this work. I went in and he had owned an art supply store and he gave it to me.
Oh my gosh.
I got framework, oil painting, brushes, linseed oil, turpentine, everything. A great abundance of material. And boy, I was in my glory days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they lasted a long time. I can always remember that magenta.
Once when we talked earlier, you said that after that you went up and found a huge rock slab that you were able to paint a mural on, but you didn't know if it was still there.
Well, I've never gone back.
What did you paint? Do you remember what the scene was?
Yeah, I have a painting in here that was done at that time, which I used for, you want to see it? I'll bring it in.
When we,
Yes,
in a moment, yeah.
In a moment, yes.
Okay, let's do
I
that.
just recovered that from my sister who died a year ago.
Good, good,
And she hoarded a lot of my very early works.
good. So you kind of got Raton by the tail as the artist in the community?
Oh yes, I still am. You
Good.
know, the El Portal Hotel promotes and features me as part of their promotion. I have free room there. Anytime I go up there, that's my home. And they still have this very deep sentiment about me, and it's nice.
It sure is. Now, that, correct me if I'm wrong, that was the location of the WPA office or one of the, and Manville Chapman was involved in that?
I don't know where the location of the WPA office was, but Manville Chapman was involved.
Was he a teacher, a supervisor,
He
or?
was a supervisor,
Okay.
and
Who all did he supervise besides you?
I didn't look up. I don't know.
Well, that's not unusual. That's what we have found with nearly all the artists.
Yeah.
They were working kind of on an individual basis,
Yeah.
and there didn't seem to be that much interaction.
I have had the feeling that it was a precious thing, and the people involved with it were very possessive about their project, about their authority, about their importance, and they didn't let you drift out to know. I had that feeling about, what was his name, the man who was in charge of it for the state?
Vernon Hunter?
Vernon Hunter, yes. And, but this is a problem with artistic egos, they're kind of small.
We got a hint that there was also possibly some prejudice. And I'm not sure that word was ever used, but it was alluded to. Did you feel that in any way?
Very much. There was prejudice. When I went to school, high school, I felt it a great deal. I felt the town was a basic West Texas place. And I discovered New Mexico after I left Raton. Because
It's interesting. It would be West Texas and have all of those Slavic kinds
they
of.
were peasants.
Oh, okay. They were not.
No, they
Yeah,
were
they were
buried
at
in the
another
mine.
level. Okay.
No, Raton was divided by the railroad tracks, and that was a geographic division between the Spanish people, the Mexican people, and the Anglo people.
Where were the Slavonic?
They lived out in Plastica and Yankee, and
They were even further out.
they were way out there. They didn't ever have anything to do excepting that they came in the 9th grade in high school, and all of a sudden here comes this horde of Zduniches and Budakovich and Sarkovich and Scots and Allens and all these other names. And it was very interesting, very stimulating, very, very productive. We had a very high level in our graduating class of that student body that went to college. 75% of them went to college,
Really?
graduated from college.
Wow. Wow.
They were very important people. One of those Slavic boys was the vice president of Westinghouse. Another one was a nuclear physicist. And they were all, there was a certain atmosphere that, but there was still this very clannish prejudice thing, you know.
Now, where did you fit being Spanish and English and Indian?
Nowhere. They gave me my freedom. And they had these, the Masons are the rulers of America.
Certainly in West Texas.
Oh, everywhere. You look at the dollar bill, that's the Masonic temple. It's a Protestant thing. And I was too busy probably in the library and visiting all of town who, I got so much nurturing, and I didn't look up. I didn't have time. I was doing my own thing or wandering in the hills. I had a real happy life. And my parents, I reported to them, and they were real pleased with what was happening. And
was there anyone else in your family involved in any of the New Deal projects, like the CCC or any of those things?
No, I was an aberration in my family.
I was going to ask you that earlier. Did the rest of the family, your siblings, get treated like you got treated?
No one did. No, I was the only one that had that.
Okay.
My sisters they were girls, they were women, I have a great compassion for them because, and I felt real guilty too because I got away with everything. No, and my brother was 15 years older.
Yes, you mentioned that.
And he was a very freewheeling man. And he did anything he wanted to. And he was a very bright man. He could have done something.
So you boys had it made, and the girls just had to kind of get by.
The usual lousy deal.
Okay. You had to be getting close now to, considering you graduated in 1940.
Right.
You had to be getting pretty close to World War II. Were you involved?
I sure was. Well, I graduated in 40, and Mr. Harrison, the superintendent of schools, called me and wondered what my plans were. And I told him I'm going to college. I'm going to a good art school or a good college. He says, where? Oh, New York or Harvard or someplace. How are you going to do it? Do you have money? I said, no, I'm just going to pack my stuff and I'm going to go there and I'm going to walk in and I'm going to tell them I came to school here. I don't have any money, but I think I'm worthy of it and I'm going to go to school here and I hope that you will help me. He said, you think you can do that? I said, I decided to. He said, how would you settle? Would you settle for the University of New Mexico? And I gave him a whirl for a moment. Yeah, I go to the University of New Mexico. He says, well, we have the student qualifications. We give out 50, the university gives out 50 scholarships to the top students in the grades, in the testing, standardized testing, and you are eligible for one. And oh boy, the lights went on, He says, well, I can get you a job down there, and you can see a certain man, and this is pay your tuition, and you have to figure out how to do the rest. Okay with me, I didn't have sense enough to know there was going to be a tough time. But that's how it went. So I went to UNM. I was a janitor and went hungry. Never thought to ask anybody for help. I just assumed that was what I was supposed to do.
Did you paint during that time?
Oh, yes. I came down and started painting, and the professor, Ralph Douglas, was the head of the department. And he was shocked that I was doing oil painting because I was a freshman. I said, nobody says I can't. He said, no. He said, but well, I painted the sandias up on the rooftop in the snow. And so they just saw that my energy wasn't going to be slowed down.
And then when did you go into World War II?
That's quite a story. I went into World War II in 1942. I got married all of a sudden.
A lot of people get married all of a sudden.
You want a real good story there? I had never kissed a girl. I had dated a lot of girls, but they were my friends, and I had no idea. I'd given them thought. And I was frightened to death about diseases. And so I met this young lady, and I had an assistantship in the sculpture department. I was doing good sculpture at that time. And I helped her mix clay, and I helped her do this, and I helped her do that, and we'd leave class, and we'd go walking, and...
You helped her do other things.
And all of a sudden, boy, I can tell you, it was April the 30th, 1942, in the evening. I went to the dorm, and she came out, and we went walking, and, oh my God, we got involved. I took Alice to shore where she was conceived.
Oh,
really?
Great.
And she said, "You're going to marry me, aren't you?" And I looked at her in astonishment. I hadn't thought about that. And she said, "I'll be a loose woman if you don't." So the next day we went down and got married. And that was the courtship of my life.
And how old were you?
I was 22. I was just about ready to start shaving.
You were a young man.
And her parents, a couple of elderly, well-to-do ladies, big powerhouses in New Mexico, said, "You have to support her. She has money, but you have to earn a living." And I thought, boy, I've never really had a job in my life. And I started looking. The only thing I could find was as a trucker. And I thought, trucker, I know how to drive a truck. Truckers, little hand trucks down at the railroad. And I killed myself that summer loading freight cars with ammunition and all kinds of stuff from one to the other. But I did it. Do you want in? Oh, well.
Does he need to face you more?
No.
Okay, I was just thinking we're getting probably a lot of profile because you're looking this way.
Oh, you need for me to look at you?
No, it's better to not look at the
Okay,
camera,
okay.
I think.
All right, I was just wondering about that.
So, my notice came. My first notice came when I was in college in the dormitory, and somebody hung it from a light chain, the ticket to Tokyo. My friends were overjoyed with the prospect of my being sent off. I was a little older than they were. I did go to Tokyo. This is one of those interesting stories. I went to training. I did murals. I talked my way into artwork always. Did Fort Warren, Wyoming, and Cheyenne. And did my basic training, and I wanted to go to officer's training school, but the captain there said, "You're too talented for me to send you away. I've got to use you to build up my company." He was a lieutenant. He wanted to be a captain. He did make him a captain, I think. And I stayed there and trained and did stuff. Did army murals for the camp. And then they sent me. I went to officer school. A week before it finished, they canceled it, so they re-established me. Then they accepted me for Army Specialized Training, go back to college and do languages. I do well with languages. And I started to go. Instead, they stopped me and to go to Chicago, and instead they sent me to a camp in Illinois because that had closed down too. So then they sent me to Virginia to study map making, and I became a topographer. And I did a good job on that. So then we received orders. The whole bunch and to go to Northern Europe. The Battle of the Bulge was on. And I was all ready to get on the truck with my duffel bag and all that, and a yell came out over the loudspeaker. Private Warder, report to the orderly room. I went in and the guy said, "Hey, soldier, you can't go on this." I said, "Why not?" He said, "I looked at your papers. You're not an American citizen."
Oh.
I said, "Yes, I am." He says, "It said here you're from New Mexico." They said, "You sit there and wait until the captain comes in." Well, I sat down and the soldiers went off. The captain came in and the captain found out and somebody got into a lot of trouble. And he said, "All we can do is send you to the Pacific. Would you mind going to the South Pacific?" I said, "I'd love it." He said, "I'd much rather go to a warm climate." So I went home on delay en route and stopped and visited the family. By that time, Alice was born, while I was in basic training. And then Sylviana was my first wife's name, came up to see me to get another baby, which she did. And we had Benita while I was gone overseas. So I went to the South Pacific. And I had a very good time. I had a good vacation. I always made my job. One of the interesting things is soldiers have their imagination extracted when they go into the military. Absolutely. And I didn't have that happen to me. And I always made a job. I always did murals, I did signs, I did something. And so I wound up doing maps and laying out cemeteries. And the colonel came in to review the little grave registration group. And he said, "We need a chapel here." He said, "Find somebody who can design and build a chapel, but they've got to be able to speak Indonesian." It was called Malaysian then. And I had a little book and I was learning it. And they came and asked me if I could do it. I said, "Of course I can." I designed a chapel. They brought me 16 native laborers, one for each post hole of mahogany that goes in this great, wonderful straw building. And I built a chapel. Had a nice experience with these very wonderful primitive Papuans. And I had a very bad officer, and I made a case against him. He got thrown away. And the new one didn't want me to be there, so they asked me if I could do a quartermaster depot. I said, "Yes, I can do a quartermaster depot." I did a quartermaster depot. And the good fortune was that I had a very nice major who had been a tank commander in North Africa. And he had been filled with lead, came over instead as the quartermaster. He didn't know anything and he turned it over to me and it turned out very well.
Has there ever been anything that you have met with the answer no? Or did you always respond with a yes?
I always said yes. I was eager. I had been eager all my life.
And still are.
I still am, yes.
So the military was not a bad time for you.
Oh, I made my way. The general happened to be named Ward.
Oh, yes.
And he got my name. He said, "You're spelling that name wrong." That's the way I was taught. He said, "Well, it's Ward." He said, "What do you want, son?" "I can't give you a medal. I have to give it to the major." I said, "Get you a job in Army headquarters." I'm a good map maker. I think I can write. I can do whatever is necessary. So the next day I was in an airplane headed for 8th Army headquarters on Leyte Island and in the historical division. And I did the maps for the history of the Southwest Pacific campaign.
Oh, gosh. Well, this could lead us in all kinds of directions, but I think I want to go back to, or bring us back to New Mexico, and talk about the people that you worked with. Now, you did, or studied with, or were friends with, and also the question of how you felt the New Deal affected your life and others here in New Mexico. That's a whole bunch, so pick whichever one you want first.
the New Deal was very important. For personally, it gave me evidence that I was recognized as a bona fide artist. Before that, only I knew it. Because they put my picture in this library with my name on it, and there were interviews and stories and so on. And I got to meet and know a lot of the artists of the New Deal. Some of them, not a lot of them. I remember that, what was his name? The one who did that mural in the Raton post office.
Fleck,
Joseph Fleck, yes, and I got to meet him, and size him up, I always was kind of sizing him up.
Now, that mural, he actually did 2 paintings there, but the mural that's in the lobby of the post office currently, that was not the original post office, was it?
No, the post office is what is the library now.
Right.
The public library.
Did he paint the mural in which building did he paint that mural?
He painted it in that little Johnson Library, which is
okay. Was it painted around a doorway?
It was painted to fit a very irregular configuration of space. I remember seeing this big stagecoach coming down the side and smaller figures in the back, and which always bothered me because I thought that it was too much perspective for a mural. But it was good. It was, I was generous. I had to be because everybody had to be with me.
All right. And what did you think of the other mural or the other one that he did that they have in the postal workers loading up the trucks and all that sort of thing? Do you remember that one?
I remember that one. I wasn't very impressed with it. It didn't have the romance that was prevalent in the murals, the WPA murals.
Just an aside, his son thought he knew every one, and that his father had done it. It was very interesting. One time I sent him a picture of that, and he did not know his father had done that one. You've touched on something, the subject matter of the New Deal art that was done in New Mexico. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Well, I think the New Deal art in New Mexico was similar to the New Deal art in the United States. They were mostly social statements, class, social, labor, statements about life in America, which was really public life in America, or the private citizen life in America in the public. And I know I looked at I've seen a few of the murals in other parts of the country, or the books that were produced. And most of them I felt were about democracy, about the worker, about equality, about boosting the dignity of the common people. And I always felt later that it was preparation for World War II.
It was, and yet, to me, I agree with you at a certain level, but it seems like to me in New Mexico, we had less of the heavy stuff like, say, Thomas Hart Benton did,
right.
Or it was more what this part of the world looked like.
Well, it was the influence of the Taos artists and the Santa Fe artists, of the romance of the West, the romance of the Indian and the Mexican, the Hispanic culture, and there was a certain, I felt a certain love or attachment to New Mexico in the murals. And
who were some of those artists that, besides, you mentioned Fleck? Let's go through some of the others that you knew at the time, and were they, or maybe you knew them Did you feel like they were comfortable with being involved in this program or involved in having the opportunity to paint in public buildings?
I think artists are glad to get an opportunity to be paid for doing something.
Because the artists at that point in time were just as economically deprived as the rest of the world,
yes,
right?
They were. They got the same pay that the laborer got, $1.25 an hour, or something like that. And life was hand to mouth. It was assumed that every artist was supposed to be poor.
Were there some that were? Do you remember any of them that?
Oh, there were a few that were. I always think of people like Victor Higgins or Randall Davies. John Younghunter seemed to be pretty well.
How about Burning House?
Burning House was a hardworking artist, and he did well. And he was a nice man. I liked him. But he was I think he was more diligent than most of the artists.
Now we're talking about the father, right? Not the son.
No, the father. This is Oscar Burning.
Yes, I thought we should clarify that.
The other Charles. Oscar Burning House was married to Schuler daughter. Miss Schuler, Evelyn Schuler, was a librarian who was very involved and close to me. And he came. He had some nice paintings there.
And the Schulers were in Raton.
Yes, Dr. Schuler was the mayor. He was very prominent citizen of Raton.
And the Schuler Theater was named after him?
That's right, yeah.
Can you share about the murals that were done in the Schuler Theater, and also who did the painting on the
backdrops?
Yes.
I don't know who did them, but they were very good paintings.
But were they done at a later time than the Manville Chapman murals in the lobby?
No, Manville Chapman murals were done after that.
Oh, okay.
When I first went to see Tom Mix in the Schuler Theater, those big panels came down with that Cimarron Canyon, the Palisades,
right,
and all the advertising around it. They were there. And Manville Chapman did the murals up in the foyer, up in the ceiling, about the same time that I got involved in the project. In fact, he probably had been working on them. He did them on canvas and then glued them up. It couldn't have been done any other way, really, considering the detail and the size.
And they are concave.
And yes, that's right. It's not a flat surface.
Right. And they depict the various areas around.
It's a historical mural. They have the Cheyenne Indians over under Johnson Mesa on one side toward the east. And then they have the Uncle Dick Wooten coming in from the Colorado migration across the Santa Fe Trail. And then the Maxwell, Maxwell and Kit Carson in another place. And the Stockton's house. What was the name of that? It was a hotel. It was a stagecoach top. It was the center of the area. And he sort of oriented them to the directions in which they happened geographically toward in that building. And
now those were New Deal.
They were New Deal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What was Manville Chapman like?
I liked Manville Chapman. He was a small, very gentle, pleasant man. He was not the typical blustery artist. He studied at the Chicago Art Institute, and he was a student with Raymond Johnson, whom Raymond Johnson disdained. He would because Manville Chapman was an illustrator, and Raymond Johnson had no patience. That was blasphemy, you know.
So, he assumed that just about anybody could do that kind of stuff. If you were going to do real good art, you had to do this transcendental stuff.
Well, you had to rise to the esoteric, to the world above the visual experience, and it was terrible. that anybody want to represent nature. And I wonder how I could do anything else. And he was a very tremendous knowledge man. And this is a sideline here, he thought that Betty was the only true artist that he ever had. And it's written in the New Mexico magazine.
Really?
Because she really is an artist only because of her own pleasure. And that's one of her work up there. See that little collage. And she's wonderful. But I don't even get to see her work.
Now, Raymond Johnson was part of a group that painted in the more abstract form. Did the ones of the rest of you who are more realism kinds of type painters, was there any association between these two? Or could he not lower himself? And who were the others?
There were, when I went to school, quite a number of his students belonged to the Transcendental School. And of course, I always remember Florence Pierce very well. She was a good friend. She still is. And her husband, Horace, I don't remember what Florence's last name was. And there was a fellow named Robert Grierbrook who was a student there at the same time that we were there. I knew all those people, and they were, but in the Bistrom School, there were artists who were doing transcendental, these circles off in the universe, the different forms and figures. They associated with each other. I don't think they were so established that they didn't. They backbit each other,
But that was kind of a new kind of thing, right?
Yes, it was, yeah.
How was it accepted or not accepted by the public, let's say?
By the public, they didn't accept it very much. A lot of artists didn't accept it at all. I know that Kenneth Adams he just thought these were a bunch of fools. He said, I could sit all day long and doodle like that.
Well, now, that brings us to a Kenneth Adams, Raymond Johnson kind of opportunity to paint something at UNM. Do you know the story of that?
I don't know the story because it happened before I went there.
But it was a New Deal project.
Yes,
they were both funded to do something.
Yes.
But you've heard stories about it.
Yeah. Now, Kenneth Adams did, I think, 3 panels on the library, one of which was damaged by vandalism. And Raymond Johnson did some over on the other side.
This was Zimmerman Library.
Zimmerman Library.
Another WPA project.
Yeah. Now, it took me quite a while to be able to digest Raymond Johnson's work. And when I studied with him, I was doing Raymond Johnson painting because, well, I wanted to learn what he had, and I'm very influenced. I like the idea, and I've done some non-objective things simply because it's a legitimate exploration, a legitimate expression, and there's something nice to just drift into the feeling of shapes and colors and find some avenue that has meaning. But most of the artists were hostile toward each other, both sides. And Raymond Johnson, like I said before, just considered they were all potboilers. I mean, they were, and the difference between the potboiler and the real artist is the real artist paints from the artist's own center, their own soul. The potboiler is painting what somebody paid him to paint. And it's very disgusting to a true artist to have someone tell you what your concept ought to be, because self-expression doesn't happen that way. And so there was always this gap. And it was in the university, there was a feud going on, real ugly, nasty stuff. There were some of the students were particularly the students that were with Raymond Johnson. And I remembered them, I remember the people. The derogatory remarks that they made about Randall Davies paintings painted with actual grease and stuff like that, you know.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes. And they weren't qualified to make those judgments. They were just faithful to Raymond Johnson.
Sure. Now, you had a connection, and you've mentioned it before. You had a strong connection early on with Emil Beestrom, and he was of that kind of group, right? But he was up here in Taos, and Johnson was down
Yeah,
here.
but Emil Beestrom was a high roller.
Oh.
He painted both.
Oh, he could be more flexible.
He did them both. He didn't restrict himself. He was a commercial artist originally. Those papers that I had were all his little tricks and stuff that he did in commercial art, illustrating, lettering, and there were some drawings in there that were commercial art drawings. I never could identify that they were his, but they were in all his papers. And so he painted a real flamboyant cowboy, and then he painted the channeled into the universe or something, you know.
He did something that, as I recall, was referred to as dynamic symmetry.
Yes, ma'am, he sure did.
What is that?
Dynamic symmetry, supposedly taken from Greek design concepts. And I have some notebooks that show dynamic symmetry that I did in his class. It was finding a symmetry in angles for composing, for compositions, you know, where you take a mountain and you find a diagonal here and over here, and they were all related to the basic format. In other words, they were called root 1 was a square, root 2 was a square with the diagonal and the circumference to the next step. And then you connected that root 3 and went on to, I've got the whole work in here, and I had a very complete somebody produced, and I sent them off to the young lady.
Did that help you to paint from your interior self, or did that force you to move around the canvas by the lines?
No, I never took it seriously. I went ahead and did what I felt like doing.
Okay.
I just found it too restricting.
Mm-hmm.
I found it that it stifled imagination. And dumb stuff.
How about Dosberg or Chapman or
I studied a little bit.
Adams?
I studied a little bit with Dosberg, with the university school. They had the university school after the war had these visiting artists, and you spent 2 weeks and you got acquainted with them. Andrew Dosberg and John Young Hunter. And
Now those two were not part of the WPA or
no,
New
they
Deal.
weren't. No, Victor Higgins. Victor Higgins was in there, wasn't he?
Yes.
WPA, yeah.
Yes.
And Oscar Brenninghauser and his Blumenschein, Joseph Imhoff, and
There's a new book out about him. I don't know if I haven't read it yet, but it's
I think I have one of his lithographs. Yeah.
All of these people were involved in the New Deal at that time. Were you involved in it at that time, or were you only involved in it as the NYA?
I was only involved through the NYA and through the Public Library in Raton.
Okay.
I was too busy being a student, and I didn't. Well, first of all, I didn't know the connections. It never occurred to me. I wanted to learn to be a good artist before I got into that, all of that, and.
But you had to be providing for a family at the same time, it sounds like to me. I mean,
That was only after
After
the
the
war. See, that was a different story. And the GI Bill did all that.
yeah. What do you think the New Deal did for New Mexico? And this, of course, would be the art projects, although there were all those other projects in New Mexico.
I think it did a wonderful thing for New Mexico. It made art a presence in the life of people who had never had anything. They could walk into places and, little by little you get acquainted with a painting. You come in to buy stamps and you keep seeing it. I know I heard remarks when I was the artist in the schools, in the Las Vegas public schools, with those beautiful paintings that were done at Highlands University by, who was the man that did those?
Lloyd Moylan in the administration building.
Yeah, Lloyd Moylan was a very good artist. I liked his talent.
Did you know him?
No, I never did. I wish I had.
He did some very fine things. Very prolific. I mean,
oh, yes. Well, he was a hard-working man. And just like I studied before the war with Brooks Willis. And Brooks Willis he was a charming man, exciting. He was a good artist.
Now, he also did some paintings in the Illfield Auditorium at Highlands.
Yeah.
And those have been painted over.
Yeah.
But hopefully we're going to get that removed. You were saying it would expose fine art to the public.
It made a awareness of art, which would never have happened, which doesn't happen now, really, other than the wild stuff. Maybe it does, I don't know. But it did then. There were, farmers and ranchers and commonplace people and railroad workers, and they saw these things. And they talked about them sometimes, And, I was asked a question now and then, well, what did you paint them? Did you paint some or something? And I didn't make a big noise about it because I considered myself an amateur, really. But I was serious about it. But I think it did really a great service, incomparable to anything that could have been. They could have had exhibits and everything else. And exhibits never do anything but a social thing, as far as I can see.
There were actually 4 art centers set up in New Mexico, and they taught classes and they had those exhibits, but they did those. So that was another component of it. Let me move to see if you know anything about what came out of the Spanish culture and the Indian culture in relation to New Deal. Do you know anything of that, or any of the artists that were involved in that, or artisans?
Not very much about the Indians. The Spanish culture was obvious. The santeros and the furniture makers, and then the presentation of the representation of the culture by the non-Spanish artists in the murals. But it did helped motivate people. And I think out of some of those influences, that a lot of the current movement of the arts and crafts that the Spanish exhibit at the fair or in New Mexico come from there. I knew some of the artists, and I could see how they were influenced by American art and read it to the marriage with the Spanish colonial stuff, the Santos and the Retablos, the Morales, the Penitente things. But it's just like the culture in general, they fed each other.
Are there any other things that you can share with us about any of the programs that you knew about, or I want to go back and ask you, when I asked you about the prejudice, you said that it was definitely present in Raton. Do you think did you ever hear of any prejudice in relation to people getting on one of these projects or not getting on a project?
No, I was too naive about that. I just glad it happened.
Yeah, I thought that would be your response, but I wanted to check with you. Do you think it made a difference in your career?
Oh, definitely. Yes, it did. You know, it's one of the building blocks. And it was a good one. It was an important one. When I take it in the light of my own evolution as an artist, it fitted well. I think it was a very significant movement. Too bad there aren't more.
Are you an artist today?
I was born to live and die an artist. Yes, I am. Absolutely. If I waver, you can have my head ground. You know, this is one of the latest things I've done. I am now having a vibrant experience with dynamic feel and color. And I went down to get exhilarated by the 4th of July maple. And that's what this is. This is that fantastic maple tree with all those yellows that try to outdo it and can't. And I'm painting that. I'm painting that's another one. These are recent, within a month. And which is a long ways from that one over there. That one won an international first prize, grand prize.
I think of you as a muralist because that's how I first knew you. Do you like to do murals over paintings, or is there any difference in terms of?
I go anywhere. I am a muralist.
Is it harder to be a muralist? To paint big as opposed to painting small?
It's harder to paint small. Painting big, you know, I have done several hundred panels in the Albuquerque public schools. In at least 65 schools in Albuquerque. And some of them have been, like the murals at Candelaria, that school on Candelaria. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Maybe it's Candelaria Elementary, between Carlisle and San Mateo.
Yeah, I know which one it is, but I can't think of it.
And boy, I hit the jackpot there. I went in and they wanted me to do the dining room, and I told them, we can afford more than that. How about here, about here? First thing you know, I did murals all over the place. To some schools, I've gone back 5 or 6 times. I've done.
Have you ever worked with the students?
Yes, I have. I've had the students paint murals up here at Ernest Stapleton, one of the most recent ones, and down at various schools, and some, especially with the Navajos. I did murals out at the Chinley Junior High School, and the students did most of the work. We conceived it together, and in the same way with the other schools out there. So, no, that's real joy. That's fun. It's not hard work. It's a physical work, but I could see a mural on a wall. I walked into that hotel up there in Angel Fire, and I said, "These walls belong to me."
The Legends Hotel, right? Or
that's the Legend. They've changed it.
I was going to say, I don't know what it's called today.
Angel
Fire or something or other,
yeah.
right?
But and I did about 600 linear feet, and the thing is, it's carte blanche. They say, "You do it. You're the artist." And so I just have fun. And no, that's a real.
So big spaces just cry out to Willie Warder.
I love big spaces. Let me have them.
Okay. I think we probably can wrap this one up. If there are any other questions that any other individuals present would like to throw in, we'd like to have them. Anything else you want to mention? In relation particularly to the New Deal, since that's what
I know that's the focus. No, I've covered it. We just need a new Deal.
I love that. Okay, thank you.